It will be fun talking to you. You asked me how is my life? Well, I always lived in the fast lane. I mean, my life was never. If for a while things became calm in my life, I felt there was something wrong. So, as someone who challenged himself throughout his life, so this right now, I would say I'm probably facing the biggest challenge of my life. But, every challenge strengthens you. So my belief is that as long as you resist, the Almighty has given us such powers within us that the more you resist, the more you discover your strength.
Now, because of the pandemic, many people are working remotely. I was going to say it's like the Sharifs in London. They're, working remotely in their jobs. Did the pandemic prepare you and all of your supporters for house arrest, for having to be in your house for long periods of time?
Well, pandemic certainly prepared us for the only way we communicate now is through Zoom. And that's pandemic. We have to thank that because otherwise either all my senior leadership is in jail or it is in hiding. And so the only way we communicate is through Zoom. So that's the great advantage of the pandemic.
I wanted to ask about that. You have something like 180 charges against you right now, including some terrorism charges. I wanted to ask, how does it feel to be the only person in history to wait until they're 70 years old to become a terrorist?
Well, Jeremy, 180 and on a daily basis going up. I'm soon to hit my double century. Look, it is sad really in a way because it's just made a mockery of our whole justice system. Because the guys who are running the show right now, they are so petrified of elections, which are to be held in October, that they're petrified of losing. Because, in the by-elections in the last few months, out of 37 by-elections, we won 30 of them. And remember, this is despite them being supported by the umpires, by the election commission, by the establishment. And so the only way they want to now allow the elections to take place is that I should be in jail or I should be disqualified because they do not want me in the election race. And hence these cases and hence this crackdown on my entire party where thousands are in jail and either they're underground or they're in jail.
It does seem like anyone who interviews you or visits you is charged with terrorism. I guess my question is, am I a terrorist now for talking to you, like for interviewing you in this way? Like, am I allowed to come to Pakistan at some point?
Well, Jeremy, right now, if you're a journalist and you talk about me positively, you will be in trouble. Four of our top journalists, four have left the country. One is on this panel right now, Mohit Pirzada. But then one of our best last year, he was slapped with sedition cases and so on, and he had to leave the country, and then he was murdered in Kenya. And I think that's one of the most tragic things that happened because he was our best investigative journalist. Meanwhile, the other outstanding journalist in our country who has the highest viewership on YouTube, he's disappeared for 2 months. So, no one knows. Yeah, Imran Riaz, he's disappeared, and his wife and his children, what they must be going through right now. When you don't know where they are, if you know they're in prison, at least you know where they are. But when they disappear, I think people go through the worst nightmare as his family is going through.
One of the strangest parts, I was reading all about the crackdown on PTI. One of the weirdest parts of this is that it's actually illegal in the media for people to say your name or show your picture. Is that true?
Well, they've been threatened. The media houses and the top anchors were all called in a meeting. The meeting was very short, 4 minutes, I'm told, and they were ordered that my name was not even to be mentioned on the media.
And so people are resorting to, calling you Qasim's father or other sorts of codes for speaking about you, I believe.
It's, Jeremy, if it wasn't so tragic, it's very funny what's going on. But it is tragic because, our media, in the last 20 years especially, it really became very vibrant. In fact, went overboard at times. But, the media was able to create this sort of public awareness about political issues that never existed before. And that's the only way someone like me, an outsider, was able to win the elections. My party only grew because of the free media, the vibrant media. And so, the pillars of democracy, one is the free media, the other is independent justice system. Same thing happened with our judiciary. In 2007, this movement started called the lawyers' movement. And the whole idea was that we needed to have an independent justice system. So we were progressing towards a genuine democracy. And then comes this situation right now where we now have, the worst type of martial law. I mean, it's an undeclared martial law right now. Basically, there is no democracy left in Pakistan.
And what makes the current, so you said we have an undeclared martial law. Pakistan has obviously been under martial law in the past. Would you say these are comparable situations?
Well, General Musharraf's martial law, and that was from 1999 to 2008. Now, I was his opponent. I was in the opposition. I went to jail for about 7-8 days during his martial law. But I'm telling you, that was liberal compared to what is going on right now. I mean, this is, I feel as if it's like, what people must have felt in Stalin's Soviet Union or Nazi Germany. I mean, people get picked up in the middle of the night. If they're not there, their relatives get picked up. Their houses get broken. They get robbed. Their businesses are shut. And this is anyone who has anything to do with PTI. I'm not even talking about the senior leadership. And it's happening to the workers. I mean, it's never happened in our country before. Totally, the media is controlled. The judiciary is under extreme pressure. And I must say, some of the judges, despite the pressure, are sort of giving us whatever little relief we get. But I mean, all civil liberties have gone out of the window.
Now, talk me through the events of, I believe, May 9th, where you reported to the Supreme Court and you were abducted inside of the Supreme Court, correct?
Well, I was sitting within the precincts of the Islamabad High Court.
Okay.
And I was sitting there to get my bail, or various bails, because every day I have my going to courts is like people going to the office. So every day I have to go to one court or the other when you have over 180 cases. So I was sitting there, and suddenly, I'm sitting in the registry office, and suddenly I see these commandos. Really, they weren't even rangers, they were commandos. And I thought, first of all, because my life is at risk according to the government, my life is at great risk. So the courts had asked them to give me protection. So I thought these guys had come to protect me, that there might be some terrorist hold up there. And then I discovered it was me who they were after. And so they really broke in, they beat up everyone. They beat up the lawyers, the staff there. They didn't drag me out like I was some sort of a terrorist. And it was all illegal. And later declared by the Supreme Court of Pakistan, declared it unconstitutional and illegal, the way they abducted me. And of course, those images, when they went out, it had a reaction.
Right. And so 4 days later, you're released from jail because the abduction was deemed illegal. And you found out that during those 4 days, there had been protests, there had been violence. And what was your reaction?
Well, when I was asked by the Supreme Court, they told them to bring me to the Supreme Court. So from the prison, I went to Supreme Court. And the first time I discovered that there had been violence was when the Chief Justice asked me, that he said, do you condone this violence? So I had no idea that there had been violence. I expected there would have been protests, but you know, when I was shot, and about 11 of our people had bullet wounds, one of the bystanders was killed. Even then there were protests, but there was no violence or there was no arson. So I was quite shocked when I was told by the Supreme Court, and I immediately, of course, condemned it. Because in my 27 years, I've always urged my party always to remain within the Constitution, our right for peaceful protest, but never violence. So as things unfolded, Jeremy, unfortunately later on, we discovered that these people were embedded within us. And the ones who indulged in arson were not PTI people. They were people who were specially embedded within our ranks, and they are the ones who indulged in violence. And since then, we've been calling for an independent investigation, but we're not getting it. Because we can prove, if there was an independent investigation, we can prove that these guys were not part of our party, because our party had never believed in violence. But unfortunately, that was used as a pretext. We feel it was pre-planned, the whole thing. Within 48 hours, 10,000 of our followers were put in prison. This can't happen unless it's pre-planned. You can't just go and pick up 10,000 people. So all this was planned. Senior leadership was put in jail, and the rest just went underground. So it was used as a pretext to dismantle the party.
Mm. Now, normally these are the kind of things that would come up during a civilian trial where they have people defending them. But that I'm being told that's not what the plan is for the people charged with this. That they're actually being well, there's a push at least for them to be tried, and for you to be tried in a military court.
Yes, well, right now in the Supreme Court, you know, I have gone, other people have gone into the Supreme Court against military courts. The case is still in the Supreme Court, but the ministers of the ruling party have actually stated that if the Supreme Court gives a verdict against military courts, the government would defy it. Just like they defied when the Supreme Court announced Punjab elections on the 14th of May, according to the Constitution, the government refused. So we don't know what will happen, but clearly, I mean, there's no room for military courts in a democracy.
Mm. One idea that I had, because I heard that 10,000 PTI workers were in jail and many others are underground. And then if they put you in jail, you know, what's going to happen? Are they going to allow PTI to contest elections without you? Or are they going to have to change the name? You got to start your own political party. And my idea was to have a political party called the PDKM, which is the Please Don't Kill Me Party, where anyone who leaves PTI can just switch to that party, and then that would be their way to stay safe while they're contesting elections.
Well, Jeremy, let me tell you what's going on right now. Now it's a race against time. The tenure of this government ends on the 12th of August. Now what they're trying to do is,
1 month.
Yeah, just under a month. So what they're trying to do is that they want to have me banned and put into prison before the 11th of August or 12th of August. And so I have these cases and these judges, the special appointed judges who are now hearing my cases, really speedy trials going on. And the whole idea is that I should be out of the race before the caretaker government comes in and the election campaign starts. Now, the problem with that is that, you know, the cases that they're going to try and have me convicted in, they are no cases. These are bogus cases. So if they go, but what they want is that they will have me convicted, and then when I go to appeal for the higher court, by the time the appeal will be heard, the elections would be over, so I would be out of the race. So this is the game plan, and also put me in prison so that I can't campaign. all I think, my view on this is that what they are trying to do is they will completely discredit our democratic system in trying to dismantle and not allow a party which has over 70% rating in Pakistan today. So the biggest political party in the country with basically almost 70% of the people behind it, if you try and make sure that it is out of the race, basically you're dismantling the democracy of the country. And that's really what they're planning to do. And all I'm hoping is that some sense will prevail somewhere along the line, because all that would do is it will destabilize the country. The country desperately needs political stability, which will then lead to economic stability. But all what they're trying to do is actually, it's going to cause more destabilization. But there's a panic amongst those who are in power that somehow, whatever happens, I should not be allowed to come back into power.
Well, one of the things I was reading that came out in the last week that made me laugh was that you were accused of being a secret Israeli agent. Is that right? And I was thinking about all of the different secret religious things. Barack Obama was accused of being a secret Muslim. Indian politicians have been accused of being secret Christians. When I first visited Pakistan, I was accused by Indians on social media of being an ISI agent, which is obviously not true now that I'm talking to you. But wouldn't it be easier for all of us just to switch countries instead of maintaining, secrecy in our countries?
Look, Jeremy, the problem is someone like me, they really find very difficult to place me. So at one end, I've been called, and a whole election campaign against me was that I was part of a Jewish lobby, a Jewish conspiracy to take over Pakistan. And then a whole campaign that I was Taliban Khan. So I was, a supporter of Taliban. And then a whole campaign for last few years, I was I was pro-army, a stooge of the military, and now I'm supposed to be anti-military. So I think, people find it easy to categorize people before maligning them. So, it depends where you stand in the political spectrum. Then accordingly, then they brand you like, Jewish lobby and so on. Point is, the saddest thing is that, my God is Rabbul Alameen. He's God of all human beings. And our Prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a mercy for all mankind, not Muslims. So, my religion is a universal religion. It is to bring people together, human beings together. And, very narrow-minded people, unfortunately, always, non-leaders I call it, non-leaders always do their politics by hatred, through hatred, by demonizing one community to get votes. So you find, non-leaders dividing humanity to come into power, whereas you have someone like, our Prophet, peace be upon him. The first constitution of Medina was where all the various religions were brought together by him. So Christians, Jews, Sabians, they were all brought together under one millet, or sort of one community. And they all had their rights, and all the rights, they were allowed to practice their religion and so on. So it was a very advanced civilization that was set up in the state of Medina. And I find it, people like Nelson Mandela, for me, these are genuine leaders who actually brought human beings together, because people like us who saw I used to play cricket, and South Africa then was apartheid state. And I played with South African cricketers, and I always thought that, one day there would be bloodshed in South Africa. But it was a leader who actually stopped the bloodshed by forgiving the ones who put him through so much, 27 years of his time in jail, and then he comes back and forgives everyone. So these are genuine leaders who bring humanity together.
Yeah, I was speaking to some of my friends in Pakistan who are Christians, and they're also supporters of you. And one of the things they brought that Christians in Pakistan, I've always found this interesting that the percentage of Christians in Pakistan is the same as the percentage of Muslims in the United States. It's about between 1% and 2%. And one of the things they were concerned about was, Christians in Pakistan being a minority, often being scapegoated by, neighbors and things like that, that they rely on the rule of law in Pakistan to protect them. And the, recent events have made them a little worried.
Well, look, Jeremy, look, what distinguishes a civilized society from a barbaric society? The Romans used to call anyone, the Romans had their laws, and everyone else were called barbarians who didn't have laws. So a human society and an animal society, the only difference is law of the jungle is might is right, and human society is only human if it has rule of law where the weak are protected from the powerful. Now, unfortunately, Pakistan has descended right now into total lawlessness. Might is right. In order to try and sideline me and my party, basically all fundamental rights have got suspended. And when that happens, basically all the weak people become vulnerable, all weak sections of the society. So rule of law is what I started my politics 27 years ago. And by the way, I was inspired by England, where I went as a teenager. And for the first time, I saw rule of law, meaning that the powerful were also under the law. Whereas I had come from what was then martial law, where you had military rule, and military rule by definition violates rule of law. So therefore, I was inspired where, the Prime Minister also had to go by the rules. And, recently you saw Boris Johnson actually losing his premiership because he broke the law. So, I mean, these are alien concepts right now in Pakistan, and that's what I started 27 years ago. And my 3.5 years in power, my biggest problem was that unfortunately the army chief at the time just was patronizing these powerful people who wanted to be above law. And I wasn't strong enough because I had a weak coalition government with a small majority. And I just wasn't strong enough to implement rule of law. And by the way, unless you have, in a parliamentary democracy, unless you come in with a proper public mandate with a huge majority, I don't think it's possible to take on the powerful mafias who put themselves above law.
I'm turning this over to Safina, who has a question.
Hello, Imran Khan. As you just mentioned about the whole campaign against you, based on religious and Semitic comments, and that reminds me of Asif Khan's interview in New York on September 27, 2017, that he actually stated that PTI in New York, PTI is a religious fringe, while he and his party are more liberal. And I have been observing, like Pakistani news, that Shiri Rahman and Asif Khaja again recently labeled you as an Israeli agent or Jews agent of Jews, which I can see that there is another campaign is going to be run by them. I just want to ask, can Pakistan ever establish a system to register these anti-Semitic comments as a hate crimes, like with appropriate consequences? Because now and then we see them using all type of these campaign against you, which really against you or anybody else in Pakistan.
Look, Safina, look. First of all, when you have people, politicians who have no ideology, the only ideology you have is any which way to get into power. So that means that they become chameleons. So Khwaja Asif would go and tell the Americans he's liberal, whereas his party members here would be talking about, the extreme sort of spewing hatred against other sects, other religions. or they would be calling themselves backing jihad, and jihad not because they believe in jihad. Jihad is a great concept, means standing up against injustice. But they would use it sort of as a religious, as trying to categorize themselves as being religious. And so they change colors wherever, whatever audience they have. And Sherry Rahman, her party claims to be very liberal, and they talk about liberalism and so on, and yet here she is making such comments and she made them in Urdu, didn't make them in English because she didn't want, the Western countries to know, what she was saying, these anti-Semite comments. Look, what I want Pakistan to be, let me just make it clear. The Pakistan I want, and the reason why Pakistan was made to be on the principles. Our founding fathers made Pakistan to be on the principles of the first state in Islam, which was in Medina. That was in every sense a modern state. It had rule of law. Number one was rule of law. Remember, just imagine at that time, forget about, even now it would be unthinkable, but at that time, a Jewish citizen wins a case against the Khalifa, which means the head of state, Hazrat Ali, one of the most revered figures in Islam, because the judge refuses to accept the testimony of his son. So all citizens, regardless of their religion, were equal. And secondly, the head of state they put themselves under the law. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, is famous saying that even if my daughter commits a crime, she will be punished. The third Khalifa, the second Khalifa, Hazrat Umar, he had his son punished for breaking the law. And so, the state was built on great principles of rule of law, everyone equal, regardless of their religion. And secondly, women were given rights. We don't realize that was the first time women were given inheritance rights at the time. The Prophet saying that man has right over woman as a woman has right over man. So, imagine at that stage, and then of course freeing the slaves. Slavery was, first time the Prophet spoke about how you have first to treat them equal, but the best thing is to free a slave. Now these were, at that time, dynamic concepts. And unfortunately, and then of course his last sermon, where he said, we're all children of Adam. We're all equal. Whatever the color of our skin. So remember, these are 100 years ago, great concepts, modern concepts. But sadly, sitting right now in Pakistan, and I'm afraid for the last 70 years, we have not even remotely come close to these principles.
Concept, this is Dr. Moeed Pizada, if you can hear me.
Ji, Moeed.
It's a privilege to be listening to you in a live space. I had the opportunity of seeing you almost every week till July, before I left, June or July or August. But I watched your interview with Tim Sebastian, and like many which you have given to Western media. And I'm mortified and surprised that someone like you is a modern man who talks of Britain, NHS, Scandinavian countries, Nelson Mandela, European history and American history, is very easily tagged as a pro-Taliban, as a medieval primitive mindset. What have you done wrong to send this impression? I really fail to understand. What have you done wrong?
Well, Moeed, look, good thing you're not here, otherwise you would be behind bars right now. So good that you've got away. Look, Moeed, I think in the Western press, the portrayal of Islam is, ever since that Iranian revolution of Ayatollah Khomeini, the portrayal of Islam was that they divided Muslims between two categories, fundamentalists and sort of liberals. So Muslims who looked like Westerners became moderates or liberals, and then anyone who was perceived to be religious sort of became a fundamentalist. So it was a bizarre categorization of 1.5 billion people on this earth. And this really started, I can remember after 1979, the fear in the Western countries was that the whole Muslim world would be swamped by Islamic revolution and from their point of view, fundamentalists would take over. And so, first of all, they didn't understand the dynamics of the Iranian Revolution. And so it was a black and white categorization of the Muslim world. So when the Taliban came in, they never quite understood the reasons behind how the Taliban took over. They did not even understand the Afghan culture. They did not understand the difference between the urban culture in Afghanistan, especially Kabul, and they didn't understand what the rural culture was, and especially the Pashtun rural culture. And so they didn't understand when the Taliban took over what were the circumstances in Afghanistan. No one went into the depth. And so it was a black and white. Taliban were these religious fundamentalists who hated women and so on and didn't like girls' education. And so whenever they ask me questions about Afghanistan, they do not understand that from Pakistan's point of view, our number one priority is that whichever is the government in Afghanistan, Pakistan must have peaceful relationship with them, because we have a 2,500 kilometer border with them. We have 3 million Afghan refugees. And when the previous government was in power, we had 3 different terrorist groups operating from Afghanistan and operating in Pakistan. ISIL, TTP, and then of course the Baloch terrorists. So from Pakistan point of view, we want a stable Afghanistan. Whether it was the previous government or the Taliban government, we want stability. Afghanistan has been through 40 years of conflict, and the people of Afghanistan have suffered. Now, from the West point of view, when they talk about human rights, and especially women's rights, it would be much better if the West if they allowed the current Afghan government to come into the mainstream. By isolating them, they're actually removing every leverage they have on trying to influence them on human rights and specifically women's rights. So right now it's a black and white thing, you know. If you talk about the Afghan government because Taliban are there, you are then also supposed to be endorsing the treatment, the girls not going to school. But clearly, I mean, any human society, everyone knows that without women's education, how can a society progress? I mean, in our government, my 3.5 years, we give special stipends to parents of poor girls in conservative areas to send their girls to school. We made 60% of the new schools we made were for girls so that we could encourage girls' education. Because simple, I mean, our biggest problem right now, just to divert, is our population growth rate. Now, every research shows that if you educate the girl child, if your women are educated, automatically the fertility rate comes down. And so, I mean, it is a necessity for Pakistan. You know, for our future, we must educate our women.
Khan Sahib, it's also surprising, if I add on the woman issue, that you come from a family in which your sisters are highly educated. They work for international organizations. They are doctors, they're engineers, they're economists. Yet you and the PTI has done the largest ever mobilization in the history of Pakistan, the political mobilization of the woman. This is for the first time that hundreds of women in Pakistan's history have been arrested and are behind bars on purely political charges. Yet your opponents very easily show you and portray you as an anti-woman character across the West, where I live right now.
I don't know, Mohit. I fail to understand that. I don't know. I think it's quite black and white because, you know, I have a very strong faith in God. I'm a, practicing Muslim. And therefore I think they just stereotype people that if you're a practicing Muslim and you have faith in God, then you automatically, then all the other things follow, that you must be, in the Western eyes, you must be against women, you must be sort of very against, you must be illiberal. Although in my opinion, actually my faith makes me very liberal. Liberal in the sense that, I believe in humanity. I believe, I again repeat, my God is God of all human beings, and my Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he was a mercy for mankind to bring humanity together. So, and of course, I'm anti-war. I mean, I do not believe conflicts military conflicts are a way of solving problems of this earth. So, but they categorize people, and I think that's the problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Imran Khan, because your opponents always are spreading news about you being anti-woman. That's actually the campaign they run in the West, especially. But I also did some search, and they acknowledge that Imran Khan's secret weapon is the resilience of women in Pakistan. I feel that despite facing like humiliation, what women have shown great strength against state oppression. We have seen since 9th of May or in last 15 months. And I feel that you are the only politician who speaks honestly, recognizing the vital role women play in governance and freedom. Many of your actually protests are attended by families, including women. However, like women like Dr. They complain about other they complain about Afghanistan's women, but they fail to speak about like Dr. Yasmin Rashid, who is actually 73-year-old gynecologist and a cancer who studied medicine in UK. She's facing terrorism charges and is unwell in jail since 11th May. Zartaj Gul, whose house was actually nearly demolished by police, is now in hiding. Malika Bukhari, who left the UK to serve Pakistan, endured 17 days in jail, humiliating conditions until she denounced herself from PTI. And I also saw the Khadija Shah, a young designer who grew up in the USA but returned to serve Pakistan, has been imprisoned since May for exercising for only fundamental right to protest. And I also saw Shiri Mazari was rearrested 5 times within short span of 4 or 5 days, despite even having a protective bail from court. And the list goes on, like Sanam Javed, Alia Hamza, and many others are also facing similar circumstances. So the question is, why don't these institutions speak about Pakistani women, and what will you do to protect women from these draconian measures and terrorism laws when you come into power, which I'm keeping my finger crossed that you will?
Well, Safina, look, first of all, never in Pakistan's history have women been treated like the way they have been done in Pakistan, not just after the 9th of May, but last year, 25th of May, that was the first time we got a shock. The way the police attacked the women, the way they raided the houses in the middle of the night, and not caring that there were women in the house, because there's a lot of respect for women in our society. This is a big fallacy that, we treat women badly here. And I will explain where this comes from, but we respect our women. And so the idea of police barging into people's house in the middle of the night, not caring that the women in the house, breaking into bedrooms, beating up the men in front of the women, this has never happened in our country before. So that first time happened on the 25th of May. And after 9th of May, what they did to peaceful protesters, women protesting peacefully, what they did to them, the way they beat them up, there's a lot of footage on social media. And I thought they went out of the way to spread terror amongst the women. And then they jailed them. And you've named a few, but there's so many other women who you haven't named, but who have been living in terrible conditions within the jail. And the worst thing is, they have deliberately terrorized the women. So this whole movement of ours, which brought women into politics, first time you saw at such large numbers women taking part in protests, and women from all sections of the society. And suddenly when these images went out, not only women being beaten up on the streets, but then women put into jail, I mean, imagine how difficult it would be for the men folk to allow their women to go out who understand Pakistani culture. And answer to your second, and by the way, this has been deliberately done. In my opinion, the last by-election we won by a huge majority in Rajanpur. One of the main reasons was huge turnout of women in the election. And I think they are going out of the way to actually depoliticize the women. I think this is a plot because this goes against our religion, our culture, against everything we believe in. And just answer to your last question, look, the problem is in Pakistan is not about women being treated badly. The problem in Pakistan is a lack of rule of law. Powerful women in Pakistan, compared to poor men in this country, are at a great advantage. I mean, a powerful women in Pakistan from strong families can have things done here. But a man from a weak background has no access to justice. So basically, it boils down to rule of law. Rule of law, I repeat, it means bringing the powerful under the law and protecting the weak from the strong. That's what you call a rule of law. And that is really what I've been struggling for 27 years. And that is eventually what will protect the weaker section of the society, whether it is women, whether it is minorities, or whether the poor men.
Thank you, Imran Khan.
Thank you. Kansab, I wanted to ask, we've been speaking about misinformation a lot during this time, and I'm not sure if you remember this. I have my own story about misinformation, and that is that I was supposed to go on a comedy tour, and I did.